Hi everyone, this is Michael David Anderson, and I am here for another review. Now, I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I usually am reviewing books or movies. Today, I'm actually going to review Orlando Studios Resort and their Halloween Horror Nights 26, which is already underway for this current year. It's going to be going through Halloween. Now, that being said, of course, how do you review, an experience at a theme park that makes sense? That being said, I feel like in this particular instance, since, I kind of do horror as a writer and have essentially, grown up around horror elements, since I was a kid, whether it's watching movies, reading books, having my mother scare me in the, hallway of my home in the dark late at night. I think I'm kind of well versed in these matters. Now, that being said, essentially Halloween Horror Nights is a special nighttime occasion. Usually Universal Studios closes down at a certain time, and it usually is not open after dark, but these are the rare exception. In fact, Halloween Horror Nights is usually open until about 1 a.m., so therefore you're able to be there for quite a while. Now, that being said, you can kind of treat Halloween Horror Nights as separated into two main events. There's going to be the ever popular haunted houses, which are usually based around popular movies and whatnot, or television shows. Like this year, for instance, they have an Exorcist house based around the original William Friedkin movie, which is considered a horror classic. They also have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween 2, not the Rob Zombie version, but the original sequel to the John Carpenter classic. They also have them based on television shows like The Walking Dead and American Horror Story, but they also have a few original houses that are not based on anything in particular. One of them being Tomb of the Ancients, which is essentially an ancient Egypt house. They also have the Lunatic Asylum 3D, where you actually wear 3D glasses for holographic projections that are throughout the house. This is actually the house of the so-called hostess. Those were air quotes, by the way, in case you weren't able to figure that out. I know this is a kind of a narrow field, and I obviously messed up the air quotes the first time. So I will remember to bring my fingers closer together from now on for that. Now, that being said, the Lunatic Asylum is run by Chance, which is essentially like a horror movie version of Harley Quinn from the DC movies and comics and the old animated series. She's an interesting character for sure, and I'll get back to her house here in a moment. But you can hear her voice all throughout the park because they actually have the PA system playing horror movie, essentially horror movie music, depending on where you're at in the park. And also, actual voice tracks from her, essentially setting things up for the park. There were also a couple of others. There's a Ghost Town, which is Wild Wild West. Take out one of those wilds. I was thinking of the Will Smith remake, which has nothing to do with this, obviously, so we'll just go back to Wild West. And then I'm probably forgetting one now that I think about it, and my Halloween Horror Night shirt is in the other room, and I'm not going to leave you to go grab it. But essentially, there's a lot to choose from. You've got several houses. Now, if you don't like lines, this is not going to be for you. Essentially, most of what you're doing are going to be houses, and you're standing in line. And the wait times can get pretty bad, especially on like a Friday or Saturday night. If you have the ability, go during the week. It's not going to be nearly as bad. On Friday night when I went, the second night of the nights that I actually attended, the wait for American Horror Story was 95 minutes for a majority of the evening. That's an hour and a half of your night that you're going to be spending in line to enter a house. And that's the thing, too. These haunted houses, just because there are so many people there, they're literally not like breaking you up. It's a constant conga line through the horror fest. So become buddies with whoever you're standing in line with, or go with friends. That way you at least have someone to talk to. If you're going by yourself, you're going to be bored out of your mind standing in line most of the time. Also, go with people who are easily scared. I think there's a psychology to haunted houses whenever they're set up like this. I think, if you're like me, for instance, and you're not easily scared, you're going in to just kind of get an experience and also kind of laugh at the other people who are getting freaked out. And also see if they can get the drop on you at one point or another to see if they can actually do a decent jump scare. But a lot of people go to these events because, I guess, they want to see, what's there, or they're going with friends and they've been talked into it. But I feel like a lot of people, pump themselves up or, feel that dread of what am I going to run into in this house? Is this going to freak me out? So it's an interesting dichotomy there. And I definitely got some laughs, but there were a couple times where they actually did get me. For instance, the second night going through the Halloween house, I had pretty much known everything that was going to be there because I'd already done it the night before. But at one point, there was a flash of light. I didn't, see very clearly what was ahead of me. And next thing I know, I'm about to push through these transparent slats. And on the other side, Michael Myers is like right in my face with a knife. So there's definitely some interesting moments. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre house I thought was one of the best in terms of sound design. It uses a lot of the sound cues from the remakes, but at the same time, they're using, the entire pantheon of Leatherface, including like the Pretty Lady version and whatnot. So there was actually a point, by the way, if you can hear that, those are my dogs. So if you hear any barking or sudden noises, don't be alarmed, it's just my dogs. But the Texas Chainsaw House, for instance, I thought it was over. I was leaving, and then they have Leatherfaces outside that can also get you. Spoiler alert, but at the same time, that'll kind of give you an idea of what to expect from this sort of event. Most of the houses were well done to some degree. The Wild West house was kind of typical. The Tomb of the Ancients house, the actual Egyptian one, was actually really well done. The only complaint I have about it is they had a lot of like mummy wraps and stuff hanging from the ceiling. Like you were constantly walking through something. So if you don't like stuff in your face, number one, that's going to be an issue. Two, it felt like I was walking through a house of tampons and toilet paper. So, just saying, it was kind of weird. The Exorcist house was a faithful, representation. American Horror Story, you'll enjoy that house if you're a big fan of the show. Me, I haven't watched every season. I kind of got to the point to where it's kind of hit or miss for me. I really enjoyed the first season. Third season was all right. I missed the second season. I've got it on Blu-ray. I'm eventually going to watch it. Freak Show I started watching, and I only got about 3 episodes in before I was like, I'm done. And I didn't even watch any of Hotel. The American Horror Story house covers Murder House, the first season, and it covers Freak Show and Hotel. So if you're a fan of all those, you're probably going to enjoy the house. Now, the one thing I will caution you on any of these houses is I've noticed that despite, the obvious, design and care that went into these houses, they also tend to use a lot of like strobing effects. So if you have light sensitivity or, are prone to epilepsy or anything along those lines, I would caution him against going into some of these houses without knowing if they use these effects first. Now, that being said, let's circle back around to the lunatic asylum. One of the best things I've seen in one of the houses was in this house. It was in the first room. Chance essentially has a guard from the asylum, and she has like a rotator crank shoved into the side of his chest, and his chest cavity is exposed, and you can see his heart, and she's cranking it. It just turns over and over. One of the most creative sights and gags that I've ever seen in a house like this. Now, of course, this was holographic, I assume. Hence the 3D glasses you had to wear going in there. The rest of the house was kind of a mixed bag, and unfortunately, you're essentially seeing it, I guess, more through her eyes of insanity. So what you run into is there's a lot of strobe lighting in most of the rooms. There's a room with a twisting corridor where you're on a bridge where even sober, you feel like you're about to fall over. It's so disorienting. I've never felt so disoriented in a haunted house as in there. So it was definitely an interesting experience. Now, I also thought it was interesting standing outside waiting to go in. Of course, they were playing actual like music, and one of the bands that they played at one point was In This Moment, which I feel was a very appropriate band to be playing outside of Chance's, Lunatic Asylum. Now, I kind of, implied that there were two major aspects to the park during Halloween Horror Nights. I've been discussing the actual, haunted houses, which are the main attraction. But the other thing are the characters. There are actual scare zones where you don't even have to be on a ride. You can just be like walking around, and people dressed up in various outfits come up to you trying to scare you. And it's interesting. Like, there were people walking around with chainsaws in the park. One such area, it looked like, rednecks with chainsaws. Another area, they were cheerleaders with chainsaws, which put me in mind of the video game Lollipop Chainsaw, which I've seen footage from but haven't played. There was an area fashioned after Mad Max, which was interesting because they pretty much had 3 instrumental tracks on repeat. It was a Nine Inch Nails track, a track from the movie Inception, and then Mad Max Fury Road music by Junkie XL. So it was definitely interesting, hearing that track and seeing, even this post-apocalyptic garb and everything. And then, of course, there are witches. There's a section where, there's so much fog where you can't even see through it at one point. There was a guy walking around on stilts with this huge, like, white flowing costume. Like, the amount of effort that was put into these is phenomenal. And it was interesting watching people freak out, especially, not even from the people with chainsaws, but, the guys with the chainsaws and the women with the chainsaws. We're all having fun. It's, if you really love to act, for instance, and need a, part-time gig, especially during the Halloween season, this is definitely one of those jobs you would probably love to have. Now, the lines are probably the biggest detractor from this, the crowds during the weekends. If you have no problem with that and you're going just for the experience, do it. It's definitely worth it. I would definitely say if you're able to go to the one in Orlando, definitely do so. They've got another one at the Universal in California, but I can't say I've been to that because I live on the East Coast. However, I've heard stories while I was actually at Halloween Horror Nights that there are people from the West Coast who specifically fly to Florida because Orlando is able to serve alcohol, whereas the California Universal does not. So it's all about the experience. Now, they do have a couple of shows that they do. There's one, the Bill and Ted Excellent Halloween Adventure, I believe it's called. It's essentially a parody of this year's pop culture references. It was okay. You could probably skip it. If you really enjoy Bill and Ted, you'll probably enjoy this, but I've heard that previous years were actually done better than this year. And there's a couple of things where I was just like, really, why did they have to reference that? There's even a Taylor Swift, Tom Hiddleston reference, which I guess is okay because it happened this year, even though they're already broken up, as we all knew what would happen. There's a Puppy Monkey Baby reference. There's the Chewbacca Mask Lady reference. And there's a lot of things, referencing like other movies, like say Star Wars, The Force Awakens, Batman versus Superman, Deadpool, all of the above. Then there's another show which is sort of like a dance number set to popular music, and the dancers are essentially ghost zombies. I don't know, I watched it for 2 or 3 minutes and was like, okay, I'm done, and walked away. So, overall, though, Halloween Horror Nights was a blast. I would definitely say go with friends if you can. Go with people that you know you're going to enjoy yourself with. I would definitely also say, if you can, get the Express Pass. It's going to save you a lot of time. It costs more money, but in the long run, I think you're going to enjoy your experience. And definitely go for multiple nights because you're not going to be able to do everything on one night, especially if it's on a weekend. The nice thing, too, is if you want to break from the scares, they do have other rides open. So you can go into, the Wizarding World. You can ride Harry Potter and the Escape from Gringotts. You can go elsewhere. You can do Krusty Land, the Simpsons ride. They have Men in Black Alien Attack open, which you probably won't ever remember that ride because Will Smith neuralizes you at the end of each ride. I loved making that joke every time, and people just gave me weird looks. And I'm just like, haven't you people ever watched the movies? Anyway, I would say Halloween Horror Nights is definitely an 8 out of 10 on my review scale. It was a blast. I really enjoyed it, and I think you would too. Questions, comments, feel free, run them by me. And as always, have a great rest of your day.